KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting Isidore's String Quartet, performing works by Haydn, Billy Childs, and Dvorak, February 20th at UC San Diego. Pre-performance art talk with the artists at Conrad Prebys Concert Hall. Tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
Welcome in San Diego, it's Jade Hindman. On today's show, the Reverend Jesse Jackson passed away at 84. We'll talk about his legacy and the march he led here in San Diego more than 40 years ago. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. Civil rights leader Jesse Jackson died earlier today at the age of 84. He is remembered for his long career fighting for peace and justice while continuing to build an inclusive rainbow coalition in the process. He twice ran for president in the 1980s, and during his campaign in 1984, Jackson visited San Diego, where he led a march across the San Diego-Tijuana border.
Let us march to the border and let the whole world know we will give peace a chance.
Here to talk more about the life and legacy of Jesse Jackson and his visit to San Diego is Seth Malios. He's a professor of anthropology with San Diego State University. Seth, welcome back to Midday Edition.
Thanks, Jade. It's nice to be here.
It's so great to have you here. Tell us more about the story of Jackson's visit to San Diego and Tijuana back in July of 1984.
I think there are two key elements to it. The first is to remember that this was only 2 weeks before the Democratic National Convention in San Francisco. So this was a campaign stunt, and Jackson was a very viable candidate for the nomination. The second thing is this was a march fighting the vilification of immigrants. Jackson came here seeking to defeat the Simpson-Mazzoli bill, which ended up passing in 1986. He called it an ugly, mean-spirited bill. And he had 2,000 individuals march with him from Larson Field in San Ysidro across the border and gave a very powerful speech.
You mentioned that the bill and the Simpson-Mazzoli Act, his words about that really sound like they could have been from last week. But this was 40 years ago. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it is so relevant today. One of the most famous things that Jackson ever said actually was at this march. He stated that undocumented workers are not illegal aliens. We're talking about people who need help. It's this emphasis on compassion that is so important and is missing from a lot of the rhetoric today. I'd also like to point out that the Trump administration has rekindled that rhetoric of illegal aliens, of criminalizing people for being here. And your point is right on. It couldn't be more salient in today's world, especially with what's going on with ICE and DHS.
Mm-hmm. And so many other things, too. It really seems Reverend Jackson was ahead of the curve in many ways on all of these issues, in particular when it came to the Middle East as well. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, he really was a visionary. Long before nations and people were rallying for the cause of Palestine, he called Zionism a poisonous weed in 1979. He was an individual that on behalf of the United States went to many other countries and fought for freedom and brought people home, whether it was South Africa or Iraq or Cuba. He was often a special envoy of the president. I also had a thought about him as I was watching the Super Bowl just a little while ago. Jesse Jackson was calling for unification of the Americas. This was just like Bad Bunny's Super Bowl show in terms of emphasizing a unified America instead of an adversarial set of continents.
Wow. Back to 84, San Diego politics looked much different back then, didn't it?
Yeah, it was very conservative, and Reagan ruled the roost. And that's where I think it's so important to appreciate the fact that Jackson's Rainbow Coalition, even though they weren't successful in getting the nomination in 84 or 88, that changed the landscape of political politics and led for this wave starting in the 90s and beyond of Democrats in San Diego and Democrats in California. He emphasizes at this march, red, yellow, brown, black, and white, we are all precious in God's sight. That Rainbow Coalition really started here with Jackson. That was his message in the 80s.
How did it resonate in San Diego at the time?
Yeah, it was mixed. What I would say is he was able to galvanize a lot of support from different groups, but at the same time, there was always a large group protesting him. His visit in '84 reminds me of Dr. King's visit in 1964 to San Diego, and that both were here fighting racist legislation. That racist legislation passed in both accounts, and that these individuals faced many protesters while they were here. Jackson faced many protesters in 1984, and Dr. King faced many in 1964.
Well, we heard just a taste earlier, but it's hard to talk about Jesse Jackson without talking about his talents as a speaker. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, he was a protege of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I think we start with that, and the power of oratory, the power of connection, and also the power of spontaneity. Jackson did not like to have his speeches written out, and this was whether it was theology or whether it was politics. He liked to read the room. He was very charismatic, and he drew on the energy of others to tailor his speeches and his message. But you're absolutely right. He was a communicator, and it's no coincidence that he was very influential in a bunch of leading Democratic presidents, whether it was Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, who also were incredibly skilled orators.
Yeah, and he had to communicate with those who didn't agree with what he was trying to do as well. I mean, you mentioned that he had a strong relationship with the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who also had a memorable visit here, also met with a lot of opposition. What can these visits tell us about the history of San Diego and California?
I look at it in a couple of different lights. One is myth busting. I'm busting the myth of San Diego, Southern California, and all of California being so progressive. It wasn't, it isn't. And that's where history can really show us what the reality was in terms of racist legislation that passed, or numbers of protesters, or the plight of these individuals. But I also think there's something optimistic that it shows up, and that is both of these individuals were playing the long game, planting seeds, accepting temporary, momentary defeats for this larger goal. Jesse Jackson did get to see a black president. He didn't get to be black president, but he got to see one. And that was heavily due to his efforts. Dr. King, at the same time, didn't get to see much of the legislation passed through the late 60s and early 70s, but was so responsible for tipping those first dominoes. So I think we can look at it with some optimism as well in terms of influencing the later generations. I can say personally, I first heard of Jesse Jackson when he showed up on Sesame Street when I was tiny. He was given his "I am somebody" speech, and I was very young when he was on. And so that's part of that planting seeds for future generations.
It is Black History Month, and when you look at Jesse Jackson's life of activism, what is the lasting legacy for you?
Yeah, I think that lasting legacy is equality, justice, and a continued fight. Some of his last public words were "not yet," meaning the job isn't done yet. So I think both being impressed with all the progress that's been made, but not getting complacent, and also being aware of new evils and rekindled evils that keep popping up, to stay vigilant in this fight.
I've been speaking with Seth Mallios, professor of anthropology at San Diego State University. Seth, it is always great to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jade.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
KPBS On Demand is supported by the National Conflict Resolution Center, geopolitics, polarization, budget concerns, all topics that can cause tension in the workplace. NCRC can help seasoned and emerging leaders navigate polarizing issues with the Culture, Communication, and Conflict Certificate. More at ncrconline.com.